Hey BookTube, it's Gabby and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my March wrap-up video, and I have never done one of these before, so I am so excited to be able to share the books that I read with you all this month. March always is a low-key month for me, even before quarantine happened, since my winter classes end in March, and so things were super slow, so I was able to get a ton of reading in, and I read 14 books this month. And considering everything going on in the world and kind of taking care of my mental health, I did not read that much spooky stuff this month, which I am kind of disappointed by. But I do have spooky content coming next week for those of you who want to listen to that. So make sure to come back next week and listen to that video for the best spooky content. But yeah, so I read 14 books this month, and since I didn't talk about the books that I read this month in any other video, I figured 14 would be kind of a lot to talk about in one video. So I'm going to try to kind of group them by category, and then I will group review them in a sense by category. So make sure to check out the description below if you want to look at the timestamps and maybe skip around different categories depending on what you like. Let's get into it. The first category is what I chose to call lackluster YA/YA dystopian. The books that I read in this category this month are The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey, Divergent by Veronica Roth, Uglies by Scott Westerfeld, and Full Tilt by Neal Shusterman. So in 3 out of 4 of these books, which is The Fifth Wave, Uglies, and Divergent, they all center around your typical young, independent female lead who's struggling in her dystopian world and fighting aliens or the government, depending on the book. I used to love these books, but like I said, there's just nothing special anymore about them. And unfortunately, it was just kind of not what I needed this month, even though I tried and tried and tried again. The Fifth Wave I've actually never read before, and I was highly disappointed by it. It basically centers around an alien invasion. So the aliens attack in waves. There has been 4 waves, and the book centers around the 5th one. So the main character, Cassie, tries to battle, aliens that look like humans. There's just that generic love triangle. I feel like usually these books only work if you care about the protagonist, but unfortunately, in all 3 of the books, I just kind of find the protagonist a little bit annoying, and so I have a really hard time caring about what happens to them. And then Full Tilt is also a reread. I was actually obsessed with this book when I read it in like middle school, but now that I've read so much more horror, YA horror was just not for me. It was really simple language and just for me not scary enough. The fear factor wasn't really there, but it is a really cute book, and I highly recommend it for anybody who is younger than I am. All 4 books were actually 3-star reads for me, which is, I feel like, pretty typical of a rating for me. They were just not what I felt like I needed in the moment. So the next category is what I want to call adorable romances, and there is also 4 books that come in this category. It is The Unhoneymooners, The Kiss Quotient, The Bride Test, and What If It's Us. Let me tell you, these books made up for all of the time I spent on those YA dystopians. I'm a sucker for a good romance when I want to be put in a good mood, and these really did it for me. The Unhoneymooners and What If It's Us were both 4-star reads for me. I think they were really cute, and I think they were not stereotypical. And then for The Kiss Quotient and The Bride Test, I gave them both 5 stars. I really love these books. I think they were quite different for romances. The author who writes them is on the autistic spectrum. She has Asperger's, and so in each one of her books, she chose to make the main character also have Asperger's. And so that's just a fresh take on a romance, because these are people who struggle with romantic relationships, and so learning how they navigate through that in the book and how their partner has to learn that and learn how to work with them on that, it's really great. It was refreshing to read something different in the romance genre, and I think it was really well done, and they're very sweet stories, and they're definitely going to lift you up, make you happy, and good to read like in dark times like this. The next category is going to be spookier book. I also read 4 books in this category, and this is where the graphic novels come into play. I read Lock and Key Volume 1, Lock and Key Volume 2, Baby Teeth, and My Sister, the Serial Killer. So these are not the typical spookier kind of books that I read, so they were branching out a little bit for me, which was definitely interesting. I picked up 2 graphic novels, as you can see. During quarantine, I have been watching a lot of Netflix, and Lock and Key is now on Netflix, and I absolutely love Joe Hill, so I definitely wanted to check out the graphic novels before I started the series, so I chose to read the first 2 ones. I rated them 5 stars. I have never really read graphic novels before these 2, and so it was definitely refreshing. There actually was a part in the first book that got me a little bit scared because I was reading it in the dark, and I was reading it scene by scene on my iPad, and I clicked on the scene and just like this like scary face popped up. So they definitely are a little bit spooky, not too spooky, but they are rated #1 for horror graphic novels on Amazon, and they are included in Kindle Unlimited, so I highly recommend checking them out. It is pretty similar to the TV show, even though the TV show kind of does not follow the sequence of events of the graphic novels. So if you read the graphic novels, it definitely does spoil the TV show. So kind of choose which one you want to do there. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading these 2, and of course they're graphic novels, so they're like 100 pages, super fast read. Check them out. Then I read Baby Teeth. This book is basically about a child that wants to murder her mother. She is nonverbal by choice and just has really angsty feelings towards her mother. I think she's like in 1st grade, and makes multiple attempts to harm her mother, take her mother's life, all these things, but she's just an annoying character. Like, there's not even good justification. She's just genuinely a psychopath. I will say the second half of the book definitely made up for the first half of the book, and I did like the ending, even though it was a cliffhanger, and I generally don't like cliffhanger endings, but it definitely made up for the rest of the book, so I did rate it 3 stars. However, if I had not finished it, it definitely was like sitting at like a 1 to 2 stars for me. But if this plot kind of intrigues you, go ahead, try it, see what you think. Don't have super high expectations for it, and don't expect there to be like a perfect ending. And then the last spookier book I read this month was My Sister, the Serial Killer. This one was a really great, really short read. It is essentially about a woman whose sister just ends up killing every single one of her boyfriends and claims self-defense, even though the sister knows like the males never try to attack her. And every time the sister kills her boyfriend, she calls her sister up and says, hey, help me take care of this. And so the story starts with one of the murders and then goes through her having the next boyfriend, and it's just kind of the dynamic of the sister struggling with trying to hide her sister's identity as a serial killer, and also like solving all the issues that come up with that. This one's set in Lagos, so it's super interesting because it gives you kind of an inside look into their health system and their police system, because the main character works as a nurse, but also when she's trying to cover up these crime scenes, she has many encounters with the police, and there the police can or at least in the story, the police can kind of be bought with bribes, and they're very unreasonable and don't really follow kind of any sort of protocols. And so it's really interesting to kind of see that, because it would be totally different if this story was set in America. And so it was really fun to kind of see that and read a different sort of serial killer book. And then my last category is books that surprised me this month. And I know that's a super generic title, but these books have nothing in common, and so I didn't know what else to call them. But there's only 2 books in this category, and that is Dorothy Must Die and The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. So Dorothy Must Die, I went into it with really, really high expectations. I love Wizard of Oz, I love Dorothy, and I was really excited to kind of see the twist. I feel like the back of the book is a little misleading in terms of where the story is going to go. It kind of said that the main character has to take the Tin Man's heart, take the Scarecrow's brain, take the Lion's courage. Most of all, Dorothy must die. And so I was like, cool, like, there's a lot's gonna happen in this book. But unfortunately, it is a series, and so I'm going to tell you, almost none of that happens in the first book. I was really surprised by how the book handled it. It's so different than The Wizard of Oz, but it's so connected to the story and connects it to why it's so different than the story that you hear. And so that was really cool, and that really surprised me. And I was also really surprised that nothing happened. I feel like this one, you kind of got to commit to the series if you want to see it all play out, which obviously is how series work. I just didn't think about that. And so I was definitely surprised by how they handled it in a good way, but really disappointed in how much content there actually was. But this was a 4-star read for me because, like I said, I did like it. I was just kind of disappointed when it ended, and I was like, wait, nothing happened. And then The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Let me tell you what happened with this. I decided, oh, let me do my first readathon. Let's spend 36 hours reading books. That didn't happen. And you know why it didn't happen? Because of this book. I started this book at noon, which was when the readathon I was participating started in. And I finished it around 11 p.m. at night, that same night. This book is so complicated and so involved. It's really doing the most. I really liked it. It just took so much brain power for me to follow along and decipher what's happening that I got to 11 p.m. at night and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed. And then the next day, couldn't read. And I didn't read another book for a week because my brain was still processing this book. And I know some people get book hangovers. I have never once in my life experienced a book hangover until this book. And now I understand. It's like my brain could not stop thinking about this book, and there was just no way I was going to pick up another book and read it. This book is kind of like a twist on Clue, where there's a murderer at a party. The main character has to figure out who did it. The twist is that he is going to examine the party from different points of view. So he becomes one person, then another person, then another person, then another person, and he's tasked with solving the murder. I'm not going to explain much more than that because if I say anything else, I'm going to have to explain like an hour's worth more of the book so you can understand. I highly recommend. It is a murder mystery. It's a really kind of almost sci-fi Agatha Christie. So I recommend picking it up if you haven't, but it is a lot, and I'll tell you it's a lot. I know I keep saying it's a lot, but I still cannot stop thinking about this. I would have rated it 5 stars, but at the end, I was just so like, what just happened? Back probably 5 stars, but I don't like to change my ratings. Those are the 14 books that I read this month. Kind of a lot. I hope you took something away from this, and next month I'll make sure to go a little bit more in depth into the books. Hopefully I won't have as many to review because I'll do other videos. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for visiting my channel and liking and subscribing, and I will see you guys with some more content soon.